ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you a question right at the start. What if the life you're living right now is only a fraction of the life you were designed to create? What if your current circumstances are not your final destination, but only a stepping stone to something greater? See, too many people go through life settling for what is instead of creating what could be. But I'm here today to tell you, you don't have to live a life by default. You can live a life by design. Most people wake up every single day and live their lives on autopilot. They get up, go to work, pay the bills, repeat the cycle, and hope something magical happens one day to change their situation. But let me challenge you with this question. What if the life you're living right now is not the life you were designed for, but simply the life you've settled for? What if the routines you've accepted as normal are nothing more than habits of survival, not strategies for success? See, there's a big difference between living by default and living by design. Living by default means you accept whatever comes your way, but living by design means you wake up every day with a blueprint, a vision, a clear direction of where you're going and why you're going there. And until you make that shift, your life will always be dictated by circumstances instead of creation. Here's the truth. Every single one of us was born with potential, but potential without intention becomes wasted possibility. Too many people sit on the sidelines of life, waiting for opportunities to knock on their door. But let me tell you something, powerful opportunities don't knock, you create the door. You design the frame, you build the hinges, and you put yourself in position to walk through it. The life you dream of doesn't show up because you wish for it. It shows up because you planned for it, prepared for it, and worked for it. That's the difference between living by default and living by design. Think about it this way. When an architect designs a building, they don't start with random bricks and hope something good comes out of it. They start with a vision on paper. They start with a plan. They can see the finished structure in their mind long before the first brick is ever laid. That's how your life has to be. You can't afford to just wake up, float through the day, and hope things fall into place. If you don't design your life, life will design it for you. And here's the scary part, the world's design for you is always smaller than God's design for you. The world will tell you to settle for just enough, but your Creator designed you for more than enough. The question is, are you willing to step into that design? Let me hit you with this. If you don't have a vision for your life, you'll always be part of someone else's vision. And guess what? Their vision will never value you the way your vision values you. When you work only for someone else's dream, they'll pay you just enough to forget your own. And some of you have been stuck in that trap for years. But today, I want you to wake up to the reality that you have the power to create. You don't have to live paycheck to paycheck. You don't have to repeat the same cycle your parents repeated. You don't have to stay trapped in a life that doesn't inspire you. You can design something different, but it starts with a decision. Now here's the hook. The quality of your life will always be equal to the quality of your design. A weak design produces a weak life. A powerful design produces a powerful life. If you design small, you'll live small. But if you dare to design big, if you dare to think beyond your limitations, if you dare to draw a blueprint so bold it scares you, then you'll step into the kind of life that makes people ask, how did you do it? And your answer will be simple. I stopped living by default and I started living by design. Excuses are the language of mediocrity, and execution is the language of mastery. Every single day, people talk themselves out of success with perfectly polished excuses that sound logical but are lethal to their destiny. They say things like, I don't have enough time, or I don't have enough money, or I don't know the right people. And it sounds convincing because society has trained us to believe that limitations are permanent. But here's the reality you've got to grab hold of. The people who win at the highest level don't have fewer challenges. They just have fewer excuses. They don't wait for perfect circumstances. They create momentum in imperfect ones. And if you're serious about creating the life you dream of, you've got to stop rehearsing reasons and start producing results. Here's a powerful hook. The moment you defend your excuse, you've already disqualified yourself from execution. Excuses may protect your pride, but they will never produce your promise. You can choose to be comfortable or you can choose to be committed, but you cannot be both at the same time. Commitment says, I'll do whatever it takes. Excuses say, I'll do it as long as it's convenient. And that's why so many people never rise to greatness, because they've confused interest with commitment. Interest is casual, but commitment is costly. Execution requires you to pay the price up front, in full, and with no refunds. Think about this. If you wait for the perfect conditions to act, you'll never act at all. People say, I'll start when I have more money, when I have more time, when I feel more ready. But let me drop a truth bomb on you. Those conditions don't create success. They're created by success. You don't get more time by waiting. You get more time by executing. You don't get more resources by wishing. You get more resources by moving. The gap between your dream and your reality is not filled with excuses. It's filled with execution. And every time you choose to act in spite of the excuse, you shorten that gap and move closer to the life you're designed to live. Excuses keep you trapped in a cycle, but execution breaks cycles and builds legacies. Some of you are stuck in the same place year after year, not because you don't know what to do, but because you've been telling yourself the same story of why you can't. You've built a case for your limitations, and your subconscious mind has turned into a courtroom that rules against your own success. But execution is the appeal that overrules every excuse. Execution says, I'll find a way. Execution says, if the door is closed, I'll build my own door. Execution says, I don't need everything to be perfect. I just need to start with what I've got. Here's the truth that separates winners from wishers. Excuses feed fear. Execution feeds faith. Every time you execute, you build confidence. Every time you make a move, even a small one, you reinforce the belief that you are capable, that you are powerful, that you are enough. Excuses shrink you, but execution expands you. Excuses are rehearsals for failure, but execution is the rehearsal for mastery. And if you're serious about living the life of your dreams, you cannot afford another day of excuse making. Let me give you a hook you'll never forget. Excuses are free, but execution is expensive. And that's why excuses are common, but execution is rare. Anybody can come up with an excuse. It takes no creativity, no discipline, no courage. But execution requires all three. And that's why the people who execute rise to the top, while the people who excuse themselves stay stuck at the bottom. You weren't designed for the bottom. You weren't created to blend into the crowd. You were created to stand out, to lead, to execute at a level that makes excuses impossible to even recognize in your vocabulary. The life you dream of isn't waiting for your excuses, it's waiting for your execution. It's waiting for you to step up, to take action, to move forward with boldness, even when the resources look slim and the odds look impossible. Because here's the final hook you need to hold onto: the people who succeed are not the ones with the least problems. They're the ones with the most persistence. And persistence is simply execution repeated over and over again until excuses have no air left to breathe. Wishing is one of the most dangerous traps people fall into, because wishing feels like progress, even though it produces nothing. People sit around talking about what they hope will happen, what they want to happen, what they dream about happening, but they never make the one shift that changes everything. They never decide. See, a wish is nothing more than a weak desire. It has no weight, no authority, no power. But when you make a decision, you cut off every other possibility. You declare to yourself and to the world, this is where I'm going, this is what I'm doing, and nothing can stop me. And that's when the universe, that's when opportunities, that's when resources begin to rearrange themselves in your favor. Not when you wish, but when you decide. Here's the hook. Wishing is cheap, but deciding is expensive. Anybody can wish for a better life. Anybody can wish for more money, better health, stronger relationships, more freedom. But a wish doesn't require you to change. A wish lets you stay comfortable. A wish costs you nothing. A decision, on the other hand, demands that you commit, that you take action, that you back it up with consistent execution. That's why most people keep wishing and never deciding, because they want the reward without the responsibility. But if you're going to create the life you dream of, you must understand that decisions are the currency of destiny. Let me ask you a question. How long are you going to stand at the crossroads of maybe and someday? How long are you going to say, I'll do it when I feel ready? The truth is, you're never going to feel perfectly ready. Readiness doesn't come before the decision, it comes after the decision. When you decide, something shifts inside of you. A new level of clarity, confidence, and conviction rises up because your mind and spirit align with the path you've chosen. It's almost as if doors that were invisible suddenly appear, but they only show up for those who've already made the choice to walk through them. The reason most people stay stuck is because they confuse interest with decision. They're interested in success, but they haven't decided to succeed. They're interested in financial freedom, but they haven't decided to create it. Interest says, I'll do it if it's convenient. Decision says, I'll do it no matter what. Interest bends under pressure, but decision produces persistence. When you make a real decision, quitting is no longer an option, failure is no longer final, and setbacks are no longer excuses. They're stepping stones. Here's another hook you've got to take with you. Indecision is the silent killer of dreams. People think fear is the enemy of success, but fear can be overcome with courage. Indecision, on the other hand, keeps you paralyzed. It keeps you circling the same mountain year after year, talking about where you're going, but never moving toward it. You cannot conquer what you continually postpone. You cannot build what you refuse to start. And you cannot start until you decide. Decisions create momentum. Every great achievement in history began with a decision. Somebody decided they would no longer accept things the way they were. Somebody decided that change was necessary. Somebody decided to take a risk when everyone else played it safe. You don't need all the answers right now. You don't need the full picture. You don't need to know exactly how it will unfold. You just need to decide. And once that decision is made, you can adapt, you can adjust, you can learn, you can grow, but you cannot make progress until you decide. So the question is not, do you want a better life? The question is, Have you decided to create it? Because the minute you decide, the minute you burn the bridges behind you, the minute you tell yourself, I'm going forward and there's no turning back, that's the moment you stop wishing and start winning. That's the moment you step out of the crowd and step into your calling. That's the moment you stop asking, what if it doesn't work? And start declaring, what if it does? And that's the power of a true decision. It transforms a wish into a reality, a possibility into a certainty, and a dream into a destiny. Fear whispers to you every single day, and its message is always the same. What if it doesn't work? What if you fail? What if you're not enough? Fear is loud, it's persistent, and it's persuasive. But faith speaks a different language. Faith asks, what if it does work? What if the door does open? What if you really are capable of more than you think? And the truth is this: the life you dream of cannot be built on the shaky ground of fear. It has to be built on the solid foundation of faith. Fear paralyzes, but faith mobilizes. Fear makes you shrink back, but faith makes you step forward. And the decision between those two voices is what determines whether you live a life of regret or a life of reward. Here's the hook you need to lock into your heart. Fear looks at the obstacle. Faith looks at the outcome. If you focus on the obstacle grows. But if you focus on the outcome, your determination grows. The people who build extraordinary lives don't do it because they never felt fear. They do it because they chose faith anyway. Courage is not the absence of fear, it's the mastery of fear. And mastery comes when you believe that something greater is guiding you, something bigger is backing you, something stronger is carrying you forward, even when the path is uncertain. Faith is not wishful thinking. Faith is not crossing your fingers and hoping for the best. Faith is the conviction that if you move, God moves with you. It's the unshakable belief that the seed you plant will grow, even if you can't see the roots forming yet. Some people never create the life of their dreams because they demand to see the whole staircase before they take the first step. But faith says, I don't need to see the whole staircase. If I can see the next step, I'll take it. And when you take one step in faith, another step appears, and then another, and then another. Before you know it, you've walked into a future that fear tried to convince you wasn't even possible. Think about this. Everything great that has ever been created started with faith. Airplanes, electricity, the internet, all of it started with somebody believing in something they couldn't yet see. They faced fear, they faced ridicule, they faced doubt, but they chose to believe anyway. That's why faith is the fuel for creation. You cannot create the life you dream of while bowing to the voice of fear, because fear is always about what could go wrong. Faith is about what could go right, and your focus determines your future. Here's another hook you've got to internalize. Fear magnifies limitations, but faith magnifies possibilities. Fear says, look at how little you have. Faith says, look at how far you can go with what you have. Fear says, don't even try, you might lose. Faith says, try anyway, because what you gain will be greater than what you risk. Fear shows you a door and tells you it's locked. Faith pushes the handle and realizes the door was open the whole time. The battle between fear and faith is not one you fight once, it's one you fight daily. Every time you step toward your dream, fear will try to pull you back. Every time you invest in yourself, fear will whisper that it's a waste. Every time you try something new, fear will tell you you're not ready. But faith answers back, I'm not waiting to be ready, I'm moving so I can become ready. And that's the difference. Fear waits, faith works. Fear hesitates, faith accelerates. Fear makes excuses, faith makes moves. If you want to create the life you dream of, you must choose faith over fear every single day. Not once, not twice, but over and over again. When you choose faith, you unlock strength you didn't know you had. You tap into resources you didn't know existed. You attract people, opportunities, and ideas that fear would have blinded you to. And here's the final hook: fear might be loud, but faith is louder when you decide to act on it. The voice of fear fades every time you take a step forward, and the voice of faith grows stronger with every victory. Choose faith, because faith is the fuel that will take you where fear could never carry you. Everybody wants the reward, but very few are willing to embrace the process. People dream about the end result, the lifestyle, the freedom, the success, but they overlook the daily disciplines it takes to get there. They want the crown without carrying the cross. They want the glory without the grind, and they want the prize without the process. But let me tell you something that will change your perspective forever. The process is not your enemy. The process is your preparation. The process is the fire that shapes you, the resistance that strengthens you, the teacher that develops you into the kind of person who can actually sustain the dream once it becomes reality. Here's the hook: the dream you have cannot live in the version of you that exists right now. It requires a stronger, wiser, more disciplined version of you, and the only way to become that version is through the process. The process will stretch you, challenge you, break off the parts of you that cannot carry the weight of your destiny. The process doesn't come to punish you. It comes to prepare you. Without the process, even if you got what you dreamed of today, you wouldn't have the capacity to keep it tomorrow. That's why the journey matters just as much as the destination. Think about an athlete training for the Olympics. They don't just show up on competition day and expect to win. They go through years of repetition, pain, sacrifice, and focus. Every lap they run, every weight they lift, every drill they repeat is building the endurance and skill needed to win when the spotlight is on. In the same way, your habits in the dark create your victories in the light. What you practice in private becomes your performance in public. That's why you can't despise the grind. It's the grind that guarantees the glory. Most people quit because the process feels too long, too hard, too uncertain. They want instant results. But here's the truth: instant success is an illusion. Real success is always gradual. It's built brick by brick, day by day, choice by choice. Every small action compounds into something bigger, and one day what looked insignificant will show up as something extraordinary. That's the hidden power of the process. It rewards consistency more than intensity. It's not about what you do once in a while. It's about what you do every single day, even when nobody is watching, even when you don't feel motivated, even when it looks like nothing is changing. Here's another hook to lock in your mind. The process will test your patience before it reveals your promise. That's why so many people miss it. They think delay means denial. They think difficulty means destiny is canceled. But what if the delay is just development? What if the struggle is shaping you for something greater? What if the process is the very thing ensuring that when you arrive at your dream, you don't lose it through immaturity or unpreparedness? The process is not working against you. It's working for you. Let me make it plain: if you fall in love with the process, the prize will chase you down. When you get addicted to growth, when you take pride in the discipline, when you wake up every day determined to outwork the person you were yesterday, the results will take care of themselves. Success is never owned, it's rented. and the rent is due every single day. The process is the rent. The process is the price. And the people who pay it consistently are the ones who eventually live the life others only dream about. So here's the final hook. The process isn't keeping you from your dream. The process is leading you to it. Every challenge, every setback, every long night, every early morning, it's all a part of the blueprint. Stop running from the process and start embracing it. Because the moment you do, you'll realize the process was never your punishment. It was always your preparation for the promise. Most people spend their energy talking about what they don't have, what they don't like, and what they think is wrong with their life. And yet they wonder why nothing changes. Complaining is easy, but it never creates anything. Creation requires courage, vision, and action. The people who transform their lives are not the ones who sit around pointing fingers. They're the ones who roll up their sleeves and start building. You can't complain your way into success. You can only create your way into it. The world doesn't reward excuses. It rewards execution. The world doesn't celebrate those who criticize. It celebrates those who contribute. If you want to inspire, you've got to create, not complain. Here's the hook: complaining is contagious, but so is creating. When you complain, you attract more complainers. But when you create, you attract creators. You become magnetic to people who share your vision, your drive, and your energy. Every time you create something, an idea, a plan, a solution, a product, a business, you set off a ripple effect that goes beyond you. Your act of creation becomes permission for someone else to believe. If they can do it, I can too. That's why creating is not just about you, it's about the legacy you're leaving behind. Complaining keeps you focused on problems, but creating shifts your focus to possibilities. The difference between the person who changes the world and the person who complains about the world is that one sees a problem and says, "That's terrible," while the other sees the same problem and says, "I can fix that." The truth is, every breakthrough we enjoy today was born because somebody decided to create instead of complain. Airplanes exist because someone created a solution to the limitation of travel. Light bulbs exist because someone created a solution to the problem of darkness. The internet exists because someone created a solution to the problem of limited communication. If those inventors had wasted their time complaining instead of creating, the world would still be waiting. Think about your own life. Every time you complain, you reinforce your limitations. You convince yourself you're powerless. But every time you create, even in a small way, you reinforce your possibilities. You remind yourself that you are powerful, that you are capable, that you can shape your reality. Creation is an act of empowerment. Complaining is an act of surrender. One pushes you forward, the other holds you back. Which one you choose determines the trajectory of your life. Here's another hook you need to grab onto. Complainers are forgotten, creators are remembered. Nobody remembers who complained about the darkness, but everybody remembers who lit the candle. Nobody remembers who complained about the cold, but everybody remembers who built the fire. History does not honor those who sat on the sidelines criticizing. It honors those who stepped into the arena and created something that outlived them. If you want to inspire, you've got to stop wasting energy on words that change nothing and start channeling that energy into actions that change everything. Now, creation doesn't mean you have to start a business, invent a product, or write a book. Creation can be as simple as creating a new mindset, creating new habits, creating new standards for your life. Creation begins with deciding to build something better rather than staying stuck in what's broken. You may not be able to change everything overnight, but you can create momentum today. And once you begin creating, you become unstoppable, because the same energy that builds one thing will fuel the building of the next. So let me leave you with this hook. The life you complain about will always stay the same, but the life you create will always change. If you want to inspire your children, create. If you want to impact your community, create. If you want to live a life that matters, create. Because complaining is a dead end, but creation is a doorway. And every time you choose creation over complaint, you don't just build your dream, you build a model of possibility that gives others permission to build theirs.